Today I have Joachim Adenusi with us. I call him Oga Risk. Uh, he's a partner at Conrad Clark Nigeria, which is an enterprise risk and management consulting firm. And he's also at IRMS, which is an enterprise risk and transformational management consulting firm in the United Kingdom, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but
No, you're right. Definitely.
fantastic. It's good
Yes.
to have you today. How are things going on your end?
Very well. Thank you, Ayo, for the interview, for the invite, by the way. UK, we've started the process of unlocking, gradually easing of things. I've not been to Nigeria because of the pandemic, but obviously still working. So I'm kind of straddled between two continents, in England and Nigeria. So but we are beginning to see the process of unlocking the economy in the UK now. And so
Fantastic.
we're hopeful, and the rate of debt falling and the rate of inflation also falling. So we're very hopeful with that.
That's good. That's good. So today we're going to be talking about risk management. I remember the first time we connected was possibly 6 years ago, I
Really,
think.
that long?
Yeah, and
Wow.
I interviewed you and someone else. I don't remember the person,
Bola.
unfortunately, on
Yeah.
radio, and we were talking about risk management. So it's amazing. 6 years later, we're talking about risk management again, but this time on
Yeah.
Zoom rather than live on radio. Uh,
Yes.
but the reason why I felt this was important was with COVID-19 and everything that's currently happening. Uh,
Mm.
I want to talk to you about how do you see companies changing and adjusting things in terms of risk management moving forward. So let me just open up with that question. What are your thoughts on that post-COVID?
Um, First, let me start by saying the one of the biggest challenges with the subject itself is the jargon. Because when you say risk management, it sounds as if it's something that they're not doing already or they're not thinking about. Actually,
Right.
if you exist to run any business, you are indirectly managing risk. And so, but sadly, most of us will do it in our minds, somewhere in our subconsciousness. For example, if you're starting a business, your first concern will be, I don't want to lose money, or I don't want to start a business. Or if someone has given you money and say, I'm giving you $10,000 to start a business, and it's not free, you're going to pay me back at the end of the year. From that moment onward, you find that there's an objective and there's a time frame. The quality of the decision you have to be making will determine what happens to that money.
Right.
Either at the end of the year, I'll be able to give back the money with interest, or at the end of the year, you're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, everything is gone. And somebody's going to be mad with you. So really, risk management is there. But COVID-19, what has it done? It has brought it to the limelight, because in the middle of crisis, one of those two things will happen. Crisis will either reveal lots of incompetencies or gaps, or expose brilliance and creativity. So there's nothing wrong with crisis, but it will reveal something, show us something. Now, what will it show us? Our agility, our speed, our ability to respond to the change that is happening. So businesses will be more open, especially from now on, to the idea of how do we handle change? And what is change? Change is synonymous to uncertainty, because you don't know what's going to hit you. We've seen COVID-19. What's the next thing that's coming?
Right.
So if something else happened, how should we respond? So I believe the lesson learned from this will be, okay, how do we respond better to uncertainty, things we're not sure is going to happen? And yes, to your question, indirectly, more businesses will be thinking about how to manage risk. Now, they might not use the word managing risk, but we're thinking about, how do we ensure we succeed? How can we stay afloat? How can we protect our staff? How can we protect our customers? How can we protect our income? How do we protect our livelihood? If it's a nation, they will think, how do we protect the human beings living in that country from this danger and what are the opportunities we can bring to bear to show our superiority during this period.
I was listening to an interview a few weeks ago, and a leader was talking about how he tried an exercise once in a training and said, okay, let's analyze and brainstorm what the worst that could happen, what's the worst that could happen, was the phrasing, and what can we do about it? And of course, this is in Nigeria, by the way, so if you're not Nigerian, you won't understand the cultural context. But someone goes, God forbid, nothing bad will happen in Jesus' name, and I found that was hilarious.
Yes.
So God forbid seems to be a strategy for some people or for some organizations. What are your thoughts on that? How do you balance the God forbid with there is reality that needs to sink in, and you need to assess the potential risk in things?
Now, thank you, Ayo. To be honest, even if you remove the word risk, there's a common saying which you're familiar with, says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Right.
So, and that's where you see the difference between those so-called global north or global south. And in some people term developed and underdeveloping countries. And you find out that at the foundation of risk management is the idea of consideration, thinking ahead. You have to consider something. You have to, and when you're considering, you're planning. If you're not a planner, you cannot consider something. You're considering different things. You're considering this. You're taking thought to think about that ahead. And the art of consideration is also a bit proactive. It's not reactive as well. So the idea of God forbid, perhaps it's shredded in ignorance. Ignorance, and I will say, do I dare say, it's not even necessarily a Nigerian thing. It must just be a modern thing. It's ignorance and perhaps literacy as well. Because if you go back to the kingdom, the African culture, Agrarian culture, they are aware of seasons and times. They are aware of time to go to the planting time when they have to plant the seed. They are aware when they have to harvest. They are aware of how to prepare the ground for the next planting season. So if they base everything on God forbid, that means we won't do anything. You just think it can never happen. Or the yam will just come up, the plantain or the maize will just pop by itself. So it's an easier way to not face responsibility and not to be accountable. Now, when people are trying to say God forbid, what they are saying is that I don't want to be accountable. And I don't want to be responsible. And I'm not prepared to be transparent.
That's deep. I like that.
Because if we're working together and say, I'm going to think about these things so that we can protect our business, it will never happen. You are almost devoiding yourself from the situation. You don't want to get involved. You don't want to put the effort in to think about it. So the easier is, it will never happen. Don't let us talk about it. Or perhaps there are things we should be talking about, but it's not convenient to bring it to the fore. So I'd rather just use that term. Oh, don't worry, it will be taken care of. And this way, you see, most people, again, just quickly talk, I'm just going to digress. And I've said this to people, when they're starting business or any venture, wherever there are no clear terms, roles and responsibility and tasks and an agreement, that there will always be abuse and trouble, even between friends, families, relationships. So you want to start a business, we need to do contract. Nothing will happen. You're my brother, don't worry. It's that same thing about accountability, transparency.
Right.
And responsibility. So if you're truly responsible and you want to be accountable in terms of what's being given to you to custode, the right thing is to be transparent about possibilities, things that can happen, and I'll be accountable in terms of what we are going to do about it. I'm responsible, but also I'll be accountable. So you find that I'm not using risk jargon, because I want people to understand this concept of risk is beyond just the term risk.
Right.
It's something we do in real terms every day.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing on that. I like that. People separating themselves from responsibility. That's a great one. That's a really good one. I think a lot of Nigerians, when they hear that, they're like, why not? But I do think
No,
I was reading.
Sorry to cut you. It's interesting. Over the weekend, I was talking to a group about a guide to starting your businesses. I think a group from Nigeria that joined the webinar, and I said, no, it wasn't a matter. I can't remember that group. I said, have you ever seen any global South leaders making commitment to what they would do with time frame that if it didn't happen, I will resign? Have you ever heard that before? Have you ever heard it before?
In Nigeria?
Anywhere. Just speak. If there's an African context in Nigeria, and I want to use that in Nigeria.
No, I've not.
And I challenge them. I say, I'm looking for a leader that will stand one day and said to me, in my first 100 days, this is what I'm going to do. If I fail, I will step down.
Right. I've not heard that. Heard that.
And I said, do you know why they cannot do that? Because the fear of what if it didn't happen? What if I didn't deliver? What if I'm unable to do this thing? So it will be obvious that I'm weak, I'm not strong. And then I've committed myself, then I will have to resign. So the idea of planning, consideration, thoughtfulness, accountability, transparency will become extremely dire, because the moment you make that comment, and the idea of managing risk and uncertainty will become essential. That's why it's key to developed countries. That when the leader make political promises, they will do everything. And if they're failing, they resign.
That's brilliant. You have an analogy on your one of the trainings that you've done where you talked about 5 approaches to risk.
Yes.
So there's the elephant approach, there's the ostrich, tortoise, bear, and eagle. Would love your analysis on the 5. So that way, everyone and anyone listening should be able to think through which one is their own, as we would say.
I mean, the 5 approaches are quite simple. If you look at elephant approach, it's huge, it's massive, very expensive, very big. So some people want to do risk management, or they want to understand how to identify threats or opportunities. They just put a lot of pomp and pageantry to it, and a lot of nice, glossy presentations, lots of money they spend there, and yet nothing is happening. It's just huge. It's a monumental display. It's to show that I have it. That is the arrogancy of that elephant approach. And that's still happening in most organizations, even within the financial services. Sometimes some of them are actually just, I have it, they show it off. But actually, they're not doing it properly. You can see all the trappings of we're doing it, but it's not actually making any difference. That's elephant. Number 2, I'm just looking at my own list. The ostrich, as you know, a kind of self-denial. I'm okay, overconfidence, God forbid. No, it can never happen. No, that kind of, why are we doing this thing? It's a waste of time. Please don't let us talk about it. They kind of dismissive, just try to hide, try to avoid, try to not confront it, run away from it, not want to be transparent with it. Because what you're going to see might be, it's going to put more responsibility and accountability on you. So an ostrich is an avoidance behavior of doing risk. So those ones that we don't need to do, it doesn't matter. That's the example you gave. The tortoise, they have it, but they're too slow, bureaucratic. God, before you get any decision, you almost feel like you're going to be 90 something or 100, because you will wait, and the politics and politicking, they know what to do, but the culture and the behavior is just too slow, dragging.
The 5 people that need to approve and sign off on a document.
Yes, you're going to get 1 million people. They're going to go through so many things. So even the thing you're trying to handle, before it happens, the thing has happened again, before you go through the approval process. So it's almost too late again to find the benefit of the subject. And the bear approach is an aggressive one: compliance, bully. And they just harass you, they bully you, you do it, they force you, they kick you, they scream at you, they scare you if you don't do it. And that's what you see from a complier point of view, where people will do risk because if I don't do it, somebody's going to penalize me, somebody's going to sanction me, somebody's going to sack me, somebody's going to threaten me. So that's the bear approach. Very, very bullish, very, very aggressive, very, very, using fear as a tool to drive the change. Now, the eagle approach is what I call the one with the right perspective from the right angle. The vision is clear, not afraid of the uncertainty, able to actually use the subject to engage on certain situations. Have clarity from afar and never miss the target. When you're going for a target, they go for it, they meet it, they hit it. Because they're able to plan, they're able to think ahead, they're able to consider it. So not too slow, not too fast, not bear, not bullish, not necessarily something expensive, big to showcase that we're doing something, and not something that in denial. That is that's the eagle approach.
I like that. So based on organizations that you've worked with over time, what would you say is more of the tendency out of the 5? Don't worry, you don't have to mention any names or industries.
I can't say that, but what I've seen.
That's a risk all by itself, huh?
Yes. So you want all my clients not to pay me again? How can you do that to me now? Come on.
But I would say
all my clients are fantastic. Let me say that for record. They're great.
I love that. You're a politician, man.
No. If you're my client, you're there. In fact, and not politics. Can I say this? If you're my client, that means I have influenced you somehow. You must be one of the best in class. That's the truth. If you're not my client, you could be in other categories. So now let me explain what I've seen in other categories, not my client now.
Okay.
In other categories, not my client, I have seen the bear approach, where they threaten people that they have to fill the risk assessment form every month, and they hated it. You find that in most organizations, when the risk department is going around to say, okay, have you updated your risk? People just think you're just a nuisance to me. You're just constituting nuisance to me. Why are you stressing me? If anyone is working in any organization, they have risk. People don't like to do it. In that instance, and when they do it, it's either they've been bullied to do it, or they're doing it like a tortoise. They're very slow. And so we say, can you give me feedback? So I'll come back to you. I have more pressing thing to do. Everything is more important than doing the risk. And so it frustrates the people who are responsible for implementing risk in the organization. So I've seen a lot of those extremes. I've seen also the denial. Those who I think this thing doesn't work, it's just a waste of your time. I've been in the business for a long time. Why are you doing all this thing? I know what's going to happen. This one doesn't work. And do you know I have to give it to those guys? Because there are two types of risk registers. If you're a risk professional, and I want to say this to you, there is the one that you see every time, and there's the one you don't see. Now, the best risk register is the one you don't see. 80% of risk reporting in most organizations is full of the one you don't see. Sorry, the one you don't see here. Because people will write what they want you to hear, but the real thing is in their brain. They won't say it. It depends.
Why do you think that?
Because it depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on the people leading the risk initiative. If risk is seen as a control, if it's seen as a kind of preventative, something that is used to avoid trouble, something that is used to minimize losses, those kind of thought, those kind of terms, people feel if I talk about this, that means I have a problem. in my department. So, and I don't know whether I need to talk about it.
So, what is your advice for risk managers that are working in organizations, I'll say first, that are trying to find their way through this, and then secondly, those that are in a, like you mentioned, a culture that it's not even accepting of it and people are holding back. What's your advice for those? They're lone rangers.
They are, because also remember, especially if they're in the regulated environment, one thing you have to notice that they're kind of a must, not that people want them, they just have to. You must have a risk manager because the regulator says you must have a risk manager. So it's not like the head of finance or budget, the guy who determines how much you spend. Everybody can't do without the budget man or the finance man. Why? Because when they tell you that I want to work with your budget, you report to duty immediately. But if a risk person says, can I talk to you about your risk? I'm too busy. I've often asked them, what's different between you? One, for those who are struggling, drop the jargons. The biggest mistake with most risk professionals is that we talk to non-risk people as if we're talking to ourselves. So when you're talking to your clients, internal clients, and you go to them like, let us review your risk, that's the first error. Never say that. If you just say the
that's
risk,
already a warning sign. People are going to put up walls and back up.
They just stop. And if you tell to me, oh, you have not, can you all review your risk register and come back to me? Another error. Which one day, I'm too busy, I don't need to talk about risk register. But there are things that the risk manager must do, must say, like a carrot. You're dropping the carrot for the rabbit. That is sweetening. That will make this guy to want you. And that's another interview.
I love that. Before we dive off though, off that topic, I wanted to quickly talk about the Oga Risk, should I call it production that you've put together.
Okay.
I would love to hear what was the inspiration behind it, and how would you say your clients have received that? And oh, by the way, to everyone listening, I'm going to put a link up so you get to see an example of what I'm talking about. It is phenomenal when you get to check out some of the things that Mr. Adenusi has done with his team. Like really, really amazing acting and planning, and a lot goes into it. So please enlighten us on that.
Okay, so Moremi, it's a story.
That's what it's called. I'm sorry.
It's Moremi. So we call it Moremi Risk Edutainment. It's education and entertainment. Now, what was the inspiration behind Moremi? In 2019, I think, yes, that year, I became the UK Risk Manager of the Year. And I was very proud of it. One, the first Black person to become the Risk Manager of the Year in the UK, in the public sector. And the implications that I want a prize to go to the US as the UK Risk Manager of the Year. And I was thinking, okay, I've been recognized by my peers. What can I add that is different? You know, and I thought, I've heard about Chinese proverbs, Chinese stories. That's an African man. And also people have always looked down on Nigeria as there's nothing, we have a bad reputation already. And I thought, but we have something. People, the reputation that we acquired, it's nothing compared to the good that is in us. And I thought, I want to be proud as a Nigerian, even though I live in the UK, or I won the UK Risk Manager of the Year. So an idea came about using storytelling to explain the relationship between risk, strategy, performance, and reward. And the Moremi story came to my mind, and I see the kingdom as a company. I see the king as the CEO. So we decided to simulate a folklore in such that anybody can use it to run their operation, as long as you have the board, you have management team. I have Babalajo, who is the chief financial officer. I have Balogun, who is the chief risk officer. I have Yomi, who is the director of strategy. And you can see all the icons, the trappings of modern business label in the kingdom. And what Moremi did was to show off the behaviors and the attitudes within a kingdom, a company, that will either encourage good risk management or discourage bad practices and also bureaucracies. And everyone who has used Moremi to train, they've never been the same.
Wow.
Because after the film, you hear something like, how do you handle a Chief Agumbiade? There's a character they call Chief Agumbiade. If you find a Chief Agumbiade in your company, how do you handle those kind of human beings? And you need to see the film to be able to see the behavior of Chief Agumbiade. Or how do you handle Babalajo, for example? And how would you describe the behavior of Balogun or Yomi? The king had a vision and he had a strategy. He created incentives and he wanted the kingdom's wealth to grow. But they had threats. As the king, he was not aware of the threats in the kingdom. And he was just giving direction without knowing what's going on at the bottom. And that
happens in a lot of places, huh?
It happens in most organizations where the big boys are there and the guys running the operations, they're so far off and disjointed. So Moremi helps businesses to integrate the top and the bottom, bottom and the top. It helps to see the difficulties in bureaucracy and the issues, opportunities, and threats that tend to divide or cause trouble that most people at the top might not be aware. And also the misconception of the bottom about the top. Because in Moremi, they thought the king didn't care. They thought the king was just a callous, selfish, greedy man who just wants to drive his performance. But they didn't realize that there were people in the middle causing trouble.
Right.
And Moremi helps us to tangle the middle to allow the business to run very well. You need to see it. Unfortunately, it's only the trailer that is on the YouTube, but we can arrange special view for people.
Fantastic. Fantastic. You know what's interesting is I've not seen the full thing. You played I think you played like a 10-minute piece at the training that I was part of.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like you whet our appetite and then you just left us dry. You know, it's okay.
I can do a private viewing for you, Ayo. Just for you alone.
Fantastic. So lastly for me, I wanted to just dive into culture. You just dabbled into it a bit. Yeah. What is your thought on your risk manager? You're working with the CEO or with the leadership team of an organization. You're looking to implement, should I say, a good culture that identifies and assesses, but the current culture that you have at hand does not allow that. Okay. I read a book once. I don't want to mention the name of the company that talked about how the executive team, they put a bug on the CEO in the CEO's car and in his hotel rooms so that they can know who he's planning to fire next.
Wow.
You know? And I screamed the day I heard that, you know, the day I was listening to this while driving and I screamed. And
it must be desperate.
It's a very well-known company, but these guys were so desperate. They needed to know who was going next. And that was how volatile the culture was. Yes. Where do you start as a risk manager? You've been given this approval or this opportunity, but you know your culture.
Okay. Okay. I suppose the first thing you need to, and thank you, Aya, for that question. Culture is one of the most difficult things to change because we're wired differently. That's why most companies, we have what you call the corporate values, where values are clearly stated. In fact, most people are going to the extent of even having measurable corporate values. When you look at year-end performance management now, people are moving away from not just the hardcore performance, but also the soft side, which is the behaviors, in order to reconcile them. Now, as a risk manager, the culture, you're not the only one you're not the custodian of the culture, although you are contributing to the culture, you are also using it.
Right.
The first few things you want to find out is that what is the governance arrangement in my organization? What do I mean by governance arrangement? And this word is the jargon, governance. Everybody, it's a commonly used term, governance. But what does it mean? Are there clearly defined roles and responsibility, tasks that are measurable? Are people accountable? Who is accountable for what? How transparent are we to challenge those who are not accountable or who are not responsible? Now, when you work into an organization where things are not clearly defined and how people are working not clearly stated, I say this as an indicator. I'm going to give you this out. If they don't have a good HR performance management process, line management process, recruitment and engagement process, or objective setting process, risk management can never work. It will all
be another function.
It will be theoretical.
Right.
It will be theoretical because you'll be doing a lot of processes, but the machineries and the thing that should enable it to flourish properly, they're not there. So somebody starts a job and you don't have your job description. You don't know who you're reporting to. You don't know how your performance will be assessed. You don't have a relationship with your line manager. There's no support for you. No, tasks are not clearly defined. When those things are not there, risk is irrelevant. Somebody will either fabricate risk or we identify wrong risk. That's why till today, most organizations have huge risk reporting systems, but yet they're in trouble. And they still have this risk manager. They have this thing. So the risk manager must understand that, one, I'm not responsible for doing risk. I'm here to enable the culture. I am here to facilitate the process. I am here to make sure that people understand it. Then number two, drop the jargon. Don't use risk terminologies with people. You're the only one. When you're talking to your fellow risk professionals, talk to them. If I was to be talking to risk professionals, I won't be using these terms the way I'm explaining things to you. There are some things I'll be saying like risk appetite, triangulation analysis, we do calibration of all the losses. We're using the jargons and we understand one another. But if you're responsible for leading risk, please don't kill them with jargons. And I'm going to say one more thing finally. If you've ever been to see your doctor, have you ever seen any doctor talking to patients in medical terms?
No, you're right.
That's exactly what I'm going to leave with the risk managers. These people are your patients. If you talk to them in your professional jargons, you lost them. They will not understand you. They will be nodding as if they do. You're not carrying them along. It's going to be lost in translation.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. This is definitely helpful. I know I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to watch more of me so I can
yes,
dive in and learn more about the kingdom.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Aya.